Friedrich Jeckeln was one of the highest-ranking members of the SS during the Second World War, and he played a major role in organizing and carrying out mass killings on the Eastern Front. His story is both disturbing and important, because it shows how ordinary structures of authority and obedience can be twisted into tools of destruction. Understanding who he was and what he did helps explain how the machinery of the Holocaust operated in practice, not just in theory. Jeckeln was born in 1895 in Germany, in a time when the country was changing quickly. He grew up in a middle-class family, went to school, and joined the army during the First World War. Like many soldiers who fought for Germany, he came out of the war angry and disillusioned. The German defeat in 1918, followed by the Treaty of Versailles, left the country humiliated and its economy weak. Many young men like Jeckeln felt that their sacrifice had been betrayed. When political movements began to promise a return to national pride and power, they found ready listeners among veterans like him. After the war, Jeckeln studied engineering and became involved in right-wing politics. By the early 1920s, he had joined paramilitary groups that fought against communists and other political opponents in the streets. These groups, often made up of former soldiers, were precursors to the Nazi movement that would later rise to power. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party began their climb toward control of Germany, Jeckeln saw in them an opportunity to serve a strong state again and to belong to a cause that claimed to restore order and greatness. He joined the Nazi Party and the SS in the 1920s. The SS, or Schutzstaffel, began as a small unit meant to protect Hitler and Nazi leaders but grew into one of the most powerful organizations in Nazi Germany. It was built on loyalty, discipline, and a belief in racial hierarchy. Within the SS, Jeckeln was seen as intelligent, organized, and extremely loyal. He rose steadily through the ranks. By the time the Nazis came to power in 1933, he already had a reputation for being both ambitious and ruthless. In the 1930s, Jeckeln held high positions in the SS in different regions of Germany. He became known as a capable administrator who could enforce Nazi policies and maintain strict control. He oversaw police forces, carried out arrests of political enemies, and helped implement anti-Jewish laws. These early years prepared him for what he would later do on a far larger and deadlier scale during the war. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Jeckeln was appointed as the higher SS and police leader for southern and later northern areas of the Eastern Front. This meant he was responsible for all SS and police operations in vast territories that included parts of Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states. The job gave him enormous power over both military and civilian life in those regions. It also placed him at the center of the Nazi campaign to destroy the Jewish population. Jeckeln became one of the main organizers of what were called mass shooting operations. Instead of deporting victims to concentration camps, Nazi forces under his command carried out executions on the spot. They gathered Jews from towns and villages, marched them to ravines or fields, forced them to undress, and shot them in groups. This method became known as the Jeckeln system, a term used by the Nazis themselves because of how efficiently he carried it out. It combined strict organization with brutal speed. One of the largest massacres under his control was in Latvia near the city of Riga. In late 1941, tens of thousands of Jews were rounded up from the city's ghetto and nearby areas. Over the course of several days, they were taken to the Rumbula forest and murdered in mass shootings. Men, women, and children were killed, and their bodies buried in large pits. This event was one of the largest single massacres of the Holocaust before the use of gas chambers became widespread. It showed the industrial scale of killing that Nazi leaders demanded and that men like Jeckeln carried out. Reports from the time show that Jeckeln personally supervised many of these operations. He made sure they followed a system. The victims were lined up, forced to lie down in layers in the pits, and shot by police units and local collaborators. His attention to detail and his drive to meet the expectations of his superiors made him stand out. Within the Nazi hierarchy, this kind of obedience and efficiency was praised, but in human terms, it meant the systematic destruction of entire communities. Jeckeln's authority also extended beyond the Jewish population. His forces targeted Roma people, Soviet prisoners of war, political opponents and others considered undesirable by Nazi ideology. The areas under his control saw widespread terror, deportations, and executions. Civilians were used as forced labor or killed as reprisals for resistance activity. The brutality was not random, but part of a deliberate plan to reshape Eastern Europe according to Nazi racial goals. Despite his power, Jeckeln was not free from internal conflicts within the Nazi system. At times he clashed with other SS leaders and local officials. He was briefly removed from command in 1942 for corruption and abuse of authority, but was later reinstated because of his usefulness. The Nazi leadership valued his ability to maintain control and to carry out orders without hesitation. He continued to serve on the Eastern Front until the last years of the war, moving between different regions as the German armies retreated. By 1944, Germany was losing the war, and Soviet forces were pushing westward. Jeckeln was transferred to Hungary and later back to Germany as the front lines collapsed. He tried to maintain order and carry out the Nazi regime's remaining policies, but by early 1945 it was clear that defeat was inevitable. In May of that year, Germany surrendered. Jeckeln was captured by Soviet troops soon after. The Soviets decided to put him on trial for his role in the massacres that had taken place in their territory. In January 1946, he was brought before a military tribunal in Riga, the same city where one of his worst crimes had occurred. The trial was public and widely reported. Jeckeln did not deny his role in the killings. He described how the orders came from above and how he had carried them out. He claimed that he was following commands, a defense used by many Nazi officials, but the court rejected it. The scale and organization of the killings under his control made him one of the most directly responsible individuals for the murder of tens of thousands of people. He was sentenced to death and executed by hanging in February 1946 in front of a large crowd. His execution was intended as both punishment and a warning. For the Soviets, it was an act of justice for the people who had been murdered. For history, it marked one of the early examples of holding Nazi officials accountable for crimes against humanity. Unlike later trials in Nuremberg, this one was conducted locally, in the place where his crimes had taken place, and the people who had suffered under his command were witnesses to his end. Friedrich Jeckeln's story is a reminder of how the Holocaust was not only carried out by distant figures in Berlin, but also by regional leaders who organized and enforced the killings on the ground. His methods, especially the system of mass shootings, became a model for other SS leaders before the Nazis shifted to extermination camps and gas chambers as their main method of killing. The transition from bullets to gas did not change the goal, only the means. Both relied on bureaucracy, obedience, and dehumanization. What makes Jeckeln's actions especially horrifying is how ordinary they appeared within the Nazi system. He did not act alone, nor did he kill with his own hands in most cases. He managed logistics, arranged schedules, and gave orders. He saw people not as individuals, but as numbers to be processed. His role shows how genocide can be carried out through routine administration when morality is replaced by ideology and duty. The murders he oversaw were not chaotic acts of rage but carefully organized operations meant to achieve racial goals defined by the state. After the war, historians studied the way Jeckeln organized his forces. His system demonstrated how the Nazis could turn regular police units into execution squads by combining military discipline with propaganda and pressure from superiors. Many of the men under his command were not fanatics when they arrived, but they became part of a killing machine because refusal was punished and participation was rewarded. The chain of command made it easy for individuals to distance themselves from moral responsibility. The story of Jeckeln also raises questions about human behavior in systems of authority. How could a person plan and carry out such crimes while thinking of himself as doing his duty? Psychological studies later explored this, showing that under certain conditions, people obey authority even when it conflicts with basic morality. Jeckeln's example is an extreme case, but it helps explain how entire institutions can participate in atrocities when obedience becomes more important than conscience. When we look back at his life, we see not only the crimes, but also the context that allowed them to happen. The chaos after the First World War, the rise of extremist politics, and the structure of totalitarian power all played roles. Jeckeln's choices cannot be separated from that context, but they also cannot be excused by it. He had agency and responsibility. He used his position and intelligence to commit acts that destroyed countless lives. His execution ended his personal story, but the consequences of his actions lasted long. In the ruins of Riga and other cities where he had ruled, survivors tried to rebuild their lives. Many lost entire families. Some testified about what they had seen, ensuring that the memory of the victims would not be erased. The records of Jeckeln's trial and his own statements became part of the historical record that documents how the Holocaust was carried out. They help us understand that genocide is not the work of monsters in the abstract, but of people who make choices within systems that reward cruelty. Thanks for watching. If you have a thought regarding Friedrich Jeckeln, drop it in a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe.